So, welcome to our look ahead to what the papers will be bringing us tomorrow. And with me to do that are the broadcaster and playwright, Bonnie Greer. Hello to you, Bonnie, and also Nigel Nelson as well, another familiar face, the political editor of the Sunday People. Just going to have a quick look at some of the front pages now before we discuss them. The Independent on Sunday looks at rising energy costs and explores the possibility of communities generating their own electricity with the help of government funding. The Sunday Express reports on comments allegedly made by Princess Michael of Kent, in which she describes senior members of the royal family as boring. The front page of The Observer reports on comments made by former Prime Minister Tony Blair, in which he argues that religious extremism has become the biggest source of conflict around the world. Well, the paper also reports on President Hollande's private life after the French leader announced he's splitting from his long-term partner. The Mail on Sunday's front page concerns the Conservative MP Aidan Burley and allegations about his behaviour at a Nazi-themed stag party at a French ski resort. While the Sunday Times also reports on President Hollande's split, and the paper points to criticism within the Labour Party at a promise by the Shadow Chancellor Ed Balls to reintroduce the 50p top rate of tax. Now, the Sunday Telegraph takes up the same theme and says that Labour's former City Minister, Lord Miners, is also against the move, which he says takes the party back to old Labour. So let's have a look at those stories in a bit more detail. Let's start with the Sunday Times. Everybody picking up on Ed Miliband's announcement and Ed Balls' announcement of a 50p tax for the highest earners over £150,000. I think what's probably interesting about what the Sunday Times is saying, perhaps not surprisingly, but it is people who donate money to Labour that are not very happy about
Yes,
this.
I mean, there will be a row about this because there is a shift in the party and it is going a bit left. And so some of the old socialist ideals are coming back, and no longer, I discovered this at party conference last year, no longer is socialist a dirty word within the Labour Party as it was under Tony Blair. So there is a bit of social engineering here, but the one point that both Ed Miliband and Ed Balls have been consistent on is if there is going to be a recovery, the people who should benefit should be the whole country and not just those people at the top.
And they've been consistent about this, and I think that's the thing that's throwing the Conservative Party off a bit. This whole cost of living crisis, this cost of living situation, the Labour Party has been able to make this a real doorstop issue. This is something people can talk about. And also the 50p tax is something people can talk about. This is a feel-bad recovery. We don't feel this. Even if it's happening, we don't feel it. And at the end of the day, and it's one of the reasons the Labour Party is ahead in the polls, people don't feel it. So it's a very clever move on the part of the Chancellor, who's been slammed for the last 3 weeks because he hasn't been saying anything in PMQs. He's not come. He's sort of been sitting there silent. Suddenly he drops this bombshell in a very assured way, and it's now scattered the forces. The Conservative Party isn't going to look good defending this, and anybody who is a Conservative Party strategist knows they're not going to look good.
So, Bonnie, do you not buy then the Conservatives' take on this, which they said before, is that it will put people off wanting to come to London, the high earners that we need, that specialise in the city, it'll put them off coming here?
Look, this idea is rather old-fashioned in the sense 20 years ago, and you see things on Twitter talking about, with Thatcher, it didn't drive them away when Thatcher did this. The rich, the international rich, are very different now. They use a term called rent seekers, and these are people who are not necessarily wealth creators. They've come over to find havens, basically. They want to live in their assets. This is a very stable country compared to many places where these people come from. And, the fact that they're here is not necessarily, and we don't know how much wealth they're adding to the country.
And it doesn't put them off either. I mean,
no, of course not. They're
not going to be happy about it because they have to pay more tax. But
clearly not.
Well, exactly.
That's found out.
Well,
but the idea is it could disrupt the recovery, which seems to be the line coming both from the Lib Dems in government and from the Tories. Seems to be an absolute nonsense. You're talking about 1% of the population, of the working population, who earn more than 150,000. The other question is the quibbling over figures. Now, the government is saying, oh, it only raises about 100 million. Ed Balls said in his speech today that in the 3 years that it was in place under Labour and through into the early days of the coalition, it raised 10 billion. So you're looking at, over a parliament, which is what he's talking about, this could be a 15 billion tax raiser. So it's really significant money.
Okay.
Absolutely, and that's the point.
Let's move on to the next story. Bonnie, would you pay £100,000 to go into space?
Not with Richard Branson, for sure. Definitely not. Exactly. No way. And actually, according to this story, this is, I guess, Tom Bowers, one of his latest sort of books about the rich and the powerful. On Richard Branson. Apparently, Sir Richard has collected $80 million, which is, I mean, for like 50 million quid, on ticket money for this space tourist thing that's been going since 2007. They've called it something like the high altitude bungee jump.
Yeah, it is. It's a bit like a bungee jump because
yes.
you go into outer space you're weightless
but
for
nothing's
a few seconds
happened.
and then you
but nothing's happened yet. And
but a lot
that's
of people
the
have
point
paid.
of
A lot of
this.
people have paid their deposits, and it was meant to have taken off in 2007, and it still
nothing's
hasn't.
happened. Yeah, and so the latest estimate is Richard Branson saying it could go in autumn this year. But Tom Bower makes the point in the book that's being serialised in the paper that the only thing so far he's done is send a rocket just into the atmosphere for 20 seconds. So,
and I didn't realise he's got competition as well. That are
and
oh,
other people try to do it.
But he's also
would you, Nigel, would you do it if you had
if I had the 100,000, I'd do it. Yeah, I think
no
it'd be great
way,
fun.
No way, not with Branson.
I would definitely.
You guys would go, okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right.
We'll leave you behind.
Definitely.
Let's move on to The Observer and extremist religion at root of 21st century wars, according to the former Prime Minister Tony Blair. If you've read his book, The Journey, this is actually something he said before, but he's coming out saying it again very publicly now.
Yeah, and the whole point here is that Tony Blair spends most of his time with his Faith Foundation. The idea of the Faith Foundation is to try and find ways of bringing peace in areas of conflict where religion plays a part in that conflict. And we're seeing that happening in Syria at the moment, we're seeing it happening in Egypt. Not so long ago, if you think about it, it happened here in Northern Ireland, that the problems between Protestants and Catholics underpinned that particular civil war. Tony Blair's argument is that there's no point going out there and trying to find political solutions solely for these conflicts. We have to solve the religious differences at the same time.
Yes, but this is from a man who, with the President of the United States at the time, actually made Iraq a moral issue. And then so suddenly, instead of going in to do whatever they thought they needed to do there, this becomes a battle between good and evil. And suddenly, Tony Blair sets up a faith foundation and wants to talk about religion. And this actually doesn't give you any solutions. He brings up a very, very old problem that, as far as I'm concerned, he helped to create.
Well, we'll be reading the conclusions of the Chilcot report into that.
Exactly.
This summer, of course, which is all about the lead up to the
we
war
hope
in Iraq. Yeah. Let's stay with The Observer, because there's a picture there of President Hollande. What do you make of this, Bonnie? I mean, is he a damaged politician?
No, listen. This is very difficult. My husband and I have a home in France, and we're Francophiles. We love France, and it's very difficult to explain to people outside of France that the French, three things. One, public life, private life of a public politician is something they don't discuss. They really, really don't. So that it is possible for the President of the Republic to issue a press statement today as a private person. The French absolutely understand that. The second thing is that there is no First Lady of France. This is something that is sort of come into the public consciousness. There is no legal status at all. So she's his girlfriend, and she's out of the Élysée Palace. And the third is that there's a thing called the French call le people, which is what we call celebrity culture. A new thing in France. The French sue for invasion of privacy, but now you've got le people as driving a lot of the journalism. The president is caught between that and those traditions, and so it's a really big sort of cultural shake-up in France.
I find the idea that this privacy idea bizarre, because I would have thought...
I don't think many politicians would survive this here, would they?
No, they wouldn't.
No, not in America either.
But the whole point here is, where I find it curious, is both the behaviour of the journalists in France and of the French people. It must be an issue what the character of their president is, and in which case then how he behaves as a character. And I'd have thought his treatment of women must be an important part of that.
Can we move on?
We can.
Yeah.
Let's move on.
We can.
Because we could have a whole debate on this, as
right.
indeed much of France and indeed the world and anybody who reads Closer magazine is. Just back to British politics on the front page of the Sunday Telegraph, Nigel.
Well, we're back to the 50p tax rate again, and this time that they've quoted Lord Miners, the former city minister, a little bit more extensively. And
just remind us why that is significant.
It's significant because he was a Labour minister under Gordon Brown. So this is the first sign of the battle that will go on within the party about this. He's talking about it goes back to old Labour. He's very insulting to Ed Balls, where he turns around and says that this kind of economics wouldn't even pass a GCSE. So he really doesn't like this at all. Although he was, remember, part of a government that first introduced it, because that's when he was in the House of Lords as a city minister.
But doesn't it go back to what you said at the beginning? How much did Alistair Darling collect when he brought this in? There seems to be a dispute about that. Is it billions or is it millions? And this is the question, really.
Ed Balls is quoting figures today, which he says he's got from Revenue and Customs, which are the latest figures, and he's come up with this figure of 10 billion.
I mean,
that was over 3 years, which is an awful lot of money. And even the groups that don't like this say that these 1% of earners over 150,000, they actually pay a third of all the tax. So the figure is a possibility. But you can see over the next few days, we'll have a load of figures being thrown around as they argue over them.
OK, let's move on to The Independent. And the headline is Beat the Big Six. What they're talking about there is energy companies, of course. Make your own energy. Now, this is an exclusive, but from what we can gather, it involves government funding communities to produce their own electricity.
It's a great idea. I think that we should back it.
This is going to be similar to people who have solar panels get some kind of... Actually, they get money off the electricity companies, don't they? But people can produce their own electricity now with solar panels.
You can do it with solar panels, you can do it with wind turbines. I mean, some of the examples that have happened before have happened with wind turbines. So at a village in Gloucestershire, the people there are getting 300 quid off their electricity bills, and they're doing it by £250 off the bill, £50 when they sell the extra energy they produce back to the grid. So they actually invest the money. They're all investing about £3,000 each.
But it's one thing. Yeah, they don't want a whole village full of them. Just one is enough.
But in the event that the government are going to pay for these, I would have thought they'd be awfully popular.
I don't know if I'd want wind turbines in my road.
You'll be in space, it'll be okay.
You'll be off there with Branson.
Yeah, it won't matter, I'll be in space with Nigel floating around.
Exactly.
2 miles above Earth. The Sunday Express, old royals are boring. That's not according to the newspaper, but according to a royal.
Well, this is Princess Michael. I guess she's pushing a book, and she's in an interview with Conrad Black. I mean, that alone would have been a very interesting thing to... I hope it's on film. And she's described, which I love, a divorcee from Bohemia. And she talks about how the older royals are boring, the new generation is lovely, Princess Diana was thick, and just basically, I suppose, pushing her book.
Yeah, and I think we always have to bear in mind that she may be getting her own back a bit because she was never terribly popular with the royals. Princess Pushy, they called her.
Absolutely, and even Diana was the first to admit that she wasn't the brightest of people. But anyhow, thank you very much. Thank you for bringing us through the papers. Thank you to Bonnie and to Nigel as well. That's it for the papers for this hour. Thanks to our guests. Coming up next on BBC News, the film review.